I now call Patrick Harvie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with the UK Government and with Police Scotland regarding the community response to attempted immigration enforcement action in Kenmure Street in Glasgow on 13th of May?
First Minister.
No.
Sorry, Humza Yousaf.
Can I thank Patrick Harvie for this important question? The First Minister and I spent a significant amount of time yesterday engaging with both the Home Office and Police Scotland to seek a safe resolution to the scenes we saw on Kenmure Street. The actions of the Home Office yesterday were, at best, utterly incompetent, at worst intended to provoke. Either way, they were completely unacceptable. Throughout the day, I was in regular discussion with Police Scotland as they updated me on their operational approach to Home Office action, which in my view placed them in an invidious position. I was pleased to see the statement from Police Scotland yesterday evening, which noted those detained had been released back into their community and subsequently that those protesting dispersed peacefully. I also shared my concerns with the Director of Immigration Enforcement for Scotland and Northern Ireland and urged him to abandon the forced removal. Unfortunately, no Home Office ministers deemed this issue serious enough to meet with me at the time. I did later participate in a video call with the First Minister and the Junior Minister for Future Borders and Immigration, Kevin Foster MP, where the First Minister made it crystal clear to the Home Office that the actions at Kenmure Street were utterly unacceptable and endangering the public's health. She expressed the Scottish Government's deep concern and anger about this operation, especially in the heart of a community celebrating Eid. To take this action in Pollokshields, the day after the First Minister warned of an upsurge of COVID cases in the south side of Glasgow, was, as I say, completely reckless. To conclude, assurances were sought from the UK Government that they will never again create, through their actions, such a dangerous situation. They did not provide those assurances. It is increasingly clear that the UK Government is incapable of delivering an immigration and asylum process that reflects Scotland's values of compassion and dignity.
Patrick Harvie.
I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for his response, and I think the community response that we saw is a demonstration of the scale of anger at the UK Government's brutality in relation to immigration and asylum, and in particular to those seeking asylum who are amongst the most vulnerable citizens of Glasgow, the city I represent. To take this action on Eid is adding insult to injury, but there are hundreds of people who will be vulnerable to such action in the future. And on whatever day it takes place, I think Scotland and Glasgow, and in particular, as we saw Pollokshields, will continue to stand against it. I'm pleased that the Cabinet Secretary has been engaging actively both with the UK Government and Police Scotland. And while I've heard mixed views about aspects of the policing yesterday, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the Police Scotland priority in any such incident must be the well-being and welfare of the people at the centre of it, the victims of these immigration enforcement actions, as well as protecting the right of the public to peacefully resist such action?
Cabinet Secretary Humza Yousaf.
Can I thank Patrick Harvie for his follow-up question? I have to say that police were put in, as I described it, an invidious position yesterday. They do not routinely accompany border agency when it comes to forced removals, but when there is an incident that they are called out to, of course, they would have to attend just as they would any incident. I am satisfied that Police Scotland took a proportionate response, but also took on the responsibility of ensuring that the safety of both the protesters, but also those whose welfare was potentially at risk, that was their priority. And I'm pleased that having looked at the issue in the context of public safety and public health, they came to the decision to release the two individuals that had been detained by the border agency. So I know Police Scotland will continue to engage with communities. It is not their responsibility, though. I think we should be absolutely careful and we should state very, very clearly on the record that the blame for yesterday's actions lies squarely on the shoulders of the Home Office and the reckless action that they took, as I say, in the heart of Scotland's Muslim community, not just Glasgow, but Scotland's Muslim community, on Eid, fully understanding the reaction that it would then provoke.
Patrick Harvie.
Thank you, and again, I'm grateful for the response. I agree that Police Scotland are not to blame for the timing or the instigation of this incident, but if the Cabinet Secretary is right that their Police Scotland priority must always be the well-being of the people at the centre of it, the victims of such enforcement action, and the safety of the public and their right to protest, then I would hope that it won't take them as long in future to ensure that releasing people in such a circumstance is the right call. Can I also ask, though, about the community itself? Because while I would wish the power to implement a humane and decent asylum system, unlike the one that operates in the UK at the moment, that we don't currently have that power. What we do have the power to do is resource our communities, both to support those who are most vulnerable to being at the receiving end of this action, and to ensure that our communities are empowered and organised to resist. Because the resistance that we saw so inspiringly on the streets of Pollokshields doesn't happen by magic. It happens by communities being resourced and organised. What role could the Scottish Government have to support such community resistance?
On the first part of Patrick Harvie's question, let me just again reiterate that, of course, operational independence means that I won't direct to the Chief Constable nor Police Scotland what to do. That is absolutely their independence. It is the Chief Constable's operational independence that will dictate what officers choose to do in any given circumstance. And they will, of course, approach each circumstance, each incident on a case-by-case basis. But Police Scotland taking that action to release those two individuals, that is not a guarantee that will happen in every single case. It depends on the circumstances and the context of the situation. What I would say to Patrick Harvie is that the long-term solution is actually having control of our own asylum and immigration policy, which I know he agrees with, and ensuring that we can have a system that is based on dignity and compassion, not one that is rooted in suspicion, as the current UK system is. I agree with his point about resourcing communities. We have a very proud track record of funding and resourcing a number of organisations such as the Scottish Refugee Council, a Govan Community Project, which works with asylum seekers in my very constituency, and many, many others. And of course, we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate this is very important, a very, very important matter, but we have a lot of questions to get through and I'd like to involve as many members as possible. So Anna Sarwar to be followed by Annie Wells, so I would appreciate concise questions and responses where possible.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I join both the Cabinet Secretary and Patrick Harvie in condemning the actions of the Home Office yesterday in Pollokshields and to reiterate how unacceptable it was for it to happen at any time but during a pandemic, at the height of a spike of cases and on the holy day of Eid. We need an immigration policy that is rooted in human dignity and human rights, and I will work with anyone to deliver that, not just here but across the UK. There are, of course, big lessons for the Home Office to learn, but will there be lessons learned from Police Scotland too about how they deal with such situations in the future, and what support will we also give to other councils across Scotland so we all take a collective responsibility to support asylum seekers here in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Again, for the interest of brevity, I do think Police Scotland were put in a very, very difficult position. And having spoken to some of the protesters who were there, having seen some of their social media commentary, by and large it seemed that the discussion, the dialogue between Police Scotland and protesters was actually very positive. What I would also say to give Anna Sarwar some assurances, I've already had an exchange with Kelly Parry, who leads, Councillor Kelly Parry, who leads on this issue for COSLA, and any discussions that we have in the future about forming a progressive alliance, which I've written to Anna Sarwar about, I'm sure he will respond positively to resist this hostile environment. Then I think COSLA should absolutely be involved so that other city councils can also learn from the example of Glasgow.
Annie Wells to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary has highlighted the response from Police Scotland. What further support will be provided to the police to manage crowds gathering during the pandemic as we continue our fight against COVID-19?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, Annie Wells is missing the point. This issue and the blame for what we saw yesterday lies squarely in the shoulders of a Home Office that took completely reckless action, went into the heart of Scotland's Muslim community on the day of Eid, when, frankly, I suspect those certainly high up in the Home Office knew that MSPs would be engaged in parliamentary process. I think is, as I say, at best it is utterly incompetent, at worst it was designed to provoke. So while Police Scotland will do the appropriate debrief, they were put in an absolute invidious position. It is not their responsibility to reverse the undignified, discompassionate policies of the Home Office. but I'm sure Police Scotland would be happy to debrief Annie Wells if she has any particular questions in this regard.
Thank you. Pam Duncan-Clancy, to be followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for his responses so far. The actions of the Home Office on the streets of Glasgow yesterday were disgusting. Can I ask the Minister if any assessment has been made regarding the human rights of the 2 men detained in their van on Kenmure Street yesterday, and whether the Scottish Government believe their human rights were breached?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I spoke with Amar Anwar, who will be known to many people across this chamber last night. He was also, my understanding, he is acting or certainly involved with the 2 individuals that were detained. So I have spoken to him, and I know the First Minister, as the constituency MSP, has also reiterated to those involved that her office, from a constituency perspective, stands ready to help and to assist wherever they can.
Thank you very much. Alex Cole-Hamilton, to be followed by James Dornan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Liberal Democrats have long argued for reform of the Home Office, stripping it of its more draconian powers that we saw employed yesterday. There will always be times in our democracy when circumstances demand an urgent act of public protest, even in a pandemic. Those acts must be supported to happen safely. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to provide an update on the current guidance relating to peaceful public protest in the context of the current COVID restrictions, and that further consideration be given to how acts of public protest can be supported to take place safely going forward?
As the members are aware, we don't encourage people to gather, though, again, when it comes to issues of protest, people do have a human right to do that under ECHR, and that is why Police Scotland have taken a very consistent approach. They have, when people have gathered, they have facilitated that right to assembly, regardless of what that protest is against or for. And that is the consistent process that Police Scotland will continue, and a consistent approach that Police Scotland will continue to take. But my message continues to be for people not to gather, because we are in the midst of a global pandemic. The virus has not gone away. In fact, if those rules and guidance and regulation did not exist, I suspect I would have been at the forefront in Kenmure Street alongside those protesters. But we did not go. I did not go because, as I say, the virus is still out there. And there are events that are taking place over the weekend. And I have been consistent to say that people should not, regardless of the circumstances, gather because the virus is still out there. So I know it is people's passions are running high, but I cannot stress enough the situation in Glasgow is still at a very critical juncture.
And James Dornan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to start off by placing on record my admiration for the community resilience of the people in Pollokshields yesterday. Kenmure Street's not far from my own constituency, and I know that some of them were there showing Scottish solidarity. The Home Office's deliberate provocative act, whilst the FM and the rest of the MSPs were being sworn in, further exemplifies how cowardly, barbaric and lacking in any common decency this Tory government really is. But can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to ensure that Police Scotland, who are not at blame for this at all, are unequivocal in their stance to play no role in the inhumane removal of asylum seekers, and outline what steps the police will be taking to maintain and indeed strengthen relations with immigrant communities in Glasgow?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, just say 2 things briefly. Police Scotland released a statement yesterday stating unequivocally that they do not assist in the removal of asylum seekers. That is the Border Agency. When they are called out to an incident, they will of course attend, but it is not their role to implement any forced removal. That is for the Border Agency. What I would say about Police Scotland, and in particular, I can speak as a constituency MSP in the south side of Glasgow, that I know Police Scotland maintain a very positive relationship with migrant communities, with communities of asylum seekers and indeed refugees, and long may that continue.
Thank you. My apologies to members who have not been